Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're going to start off this work session with a special session. So I need to have a motion to go into special session, please.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. First item on the agenda is a moment of silence and some commemoration from Fire Chief Steve Lord. Steve, you step up to the podium.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I want to personally thank you for the opportunity to say a few words on the 17th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks on our country on behalf of all public safety providers in the city and in the region. You know, it's only fitting that today is kind of a gray and overcast day. I remember it like it was yesterday. 17 years ago today, it was bright, sunny, blue skies, white clouds. And when American Airlines Flight 11 was purposefully flown into the North Tower of the World Trade Center to cause maximum harm to our citizens and to this country, it changed our lives forever. Not only the lives of first responders, but the lives of every single citizen in the United States. So we take pause today just to reflect on what that really means. And as fiercely proud as I am of first responders, firefighters, law enforcement officers, EMS providers, I also like to pay homage not only to our military, but to the unsung heroes that day, what I call everyday heroes: elevator mechanics, transit police, everyday citizens that stepped up in a great time of need when just under 4,000 of our citizens lost everything. So as the mayor prepares to present a proclamation, I would simply like to thank the leadership here for recognizing that all of us together are our nation's first responders. I don't think we treated it the same way before 9/11. We certainly have to treat it that way moving forward if we're going to appropriately serve our citizens. So with that, Mayor, I'll let you present the proclamation and declare a moment of silence. Thank you all again.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief? All right. A proclamation for Citizen Emergency Preparedness Month. And before I read this, I want to echo a little bit about what Chief Lord said. You know, 17 years ago, this country was dumbstruck by the events that unfolded on TV that day that everybody got to watch, and the pain it caused across this nation, and then the patriotism that followed that that we had never seen in my lifetime anyway. You know, not only our citizens lost their lives that day, but citizens from 91 different countries were killed on 9/11/2001. So anyway, as Vice President Mike Pence said today, we mourn with the mourners and grieve with the grievers. So let us never forget. A proclamation for Citizen Emergency Preparedness Month, September 2018. Whereas on September 11, 2001, citizens were faced with a horrible tragedy, which has now made emergency preparedness a high priority and necessity in our lives. And whereas agencies and citizens formed a local Citizen Corps committee whose mission is to implement Citizen Corps programs and carry out a local strategy to have every American participate. And whereas the Citizens Corps committee promotes and strengthens programs at the community level, provides opportunities for special skills and interest, develops targeted outreach for the community, provides opportunities of training in first aid and emergency preparedness, organizes special projects and community events, encourages cooperation and collaboration among community leaders, and creates opportunities for all residents to participate. And whereas by encouraging more people to join in the ranks of volunteers and further the knowledge in handling difficult situations, Hagerstown and its citizens can only become further prepared should an emergency arise. Now therefore be resolved with the support of the City Council, I, Robert E. Bridget II, Mayor of the City of Hagerstown, Maryland, to hereby proclaim the month of September 2018 as Citizens Emergency Preparedness Month and encourage the citizens of Hagerstown and Washington County to further their knowledge on how to prepare for an emergency. And I'll offer this to you. And if we could just have a moment of silence, please. Thank you, Chief. All right, next up is the approval of an ordinance authorizing the sale of property located at 17 to 25 East Franklin Street.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and city council to approve an ordinance authorizing the sale of city-owned property located at 17 to 25 East Franklin Street to WLR Holding Company Incorporated for the sum of $250,000. The sale will provide the opportunity for approximately $850,000 of private investment to create professional office space and residential units. The sale will be in accordance with all terms and conditions outlined in the attached purchase agreement.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Approval of an ordinance amending Chapter 33 Code of Ethics of the City Code.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and council to approve an ordinance to amend Chapter 33 Code of Ethics of the City Code by repealing and reenacting portions of Chapter 33 to add or amend certain provisions required by state law. The sections being repealed and reenacted are Section 33-3 Prohibited Acts, Section 33-3.1 Financial Disclosure Elected Officials, and Section 33-4 Financial Disclosure Employees and Appointed Officials.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Approval of resolution addendum to financial incentive agreement for the Hamilton Hotel located at 86 to 98 West Washington Street.
Mr. Mayor, we move from mayor and city council to approve a resolution authorizing the addendum to the financial incentive agreement for the Hamilton Hotel located at 86 to 98 West Washington Street. The addendum will extend the project completion deadline from August 31st, 2018 to August 31st, 2019.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. All right, we'll leave the special session, move into the work session. First on the agenda is Jim Bender and Rodney Tissue on the NPDES stormwater permit notice of intent.
Good afternoon. I think Rodney and I have been coming to council for the past, I don't know, 8 or 9 years saying sooner or later our new stormwater permit's going to get here. Well, it's finally arrived. The MDE announced this spring that they were issuing the new permit, and they've given all the communities that are covered under this permit until the end of October to file a notice of intent that we want to participate under that permit. I mean, it's either we agree to be covered under this general permit, or I suppose the city could request that we get our own special individualized permit and operate under that. But from everything that Rodney and I have heard and different consultants we've talked to, it's much better to be under the general permit that treats all these small communities the same. It's usually not as strict, and we don't have as many things to show or verify during the year if we're under a general permit as opposed to an individual permit. So the permit, the new permit has two parts to it, two basic parts. The first part is the same thing that we've been operating under since 2002, which is there are 6 different areas where the city is supposed to work on stormwater issues, and they're outlined in the memo. I'm not going to go into detail on them, but they include public education and outreach, public involvement, illicit discharge, detection and elimination, construction site stormwater runoff, post-construction stormwater management, and basically good housekeeping. Out of those 6 areas, we already do report on those. We already do work under the existing permit to meet those. Out of those 6 areas, probably the one that's going to cause the most work for the city, at least initially, is number 6. It's the good housekeeping section. And what they're looking for is they want the city and all municipalities to really go through with a fine-tooth comb and look at their organizations, look at all of their facilities, and look at how stormwater runoff is treated at those. And it may not seem like a very big task, but part of what they are looking for is at each facility, they want to know, do you know where your floor drains go to? So if you wash something into the floor drain inside your building, what's it connected to? Does it go through any sort of a treatment facility? At Public Works, they're going to want to know, okay, you've got this salt stockpile outside that we use in the winter. How is runoff from it being controlled? What keeps that from just washing into the stream? At CMG, if they're working on a piece of equipment and a hose breaks on it, a hydraulic hose, what are the procedures for trying to contain that oil? What do you do if there's a spill? That sort of thing. So there's going to be a lot of work on our part trying to identify all those things. And then the other part of the new permit is we need to come up with policies or basically handbooks for every facility. How do you deal with these things, and how do you minimize the chance for pollution from them? So it's certainly not impossible, but it's going to force us to take a look at things we maybe have not really considered before, and we're going to have to come up with plans of action to try to deal with them. So that's one main area of the permit. The other area that is new, and we knew that this was coming, is for the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, total maximum daily load. They've included a requirement that we treat 20% of the impervious area in the city that doesn't already have stormwater management treatment. So in the city, based on our calculations, that is going to mean providing treatment for about 400 acres of impervious area. And a lot of that is in the sort of I'll call it the downtown core area. It's the oldest part of the city where you had storm drainage systems, but nobody ever gave any thought to providing treatment for that stormwater. You were just trying to get it out of downtown. The problem with that is we now need to find a way to treat that water, and we don't have any space to do it because it's so densely developed. So we're working on a number of different strategies to deal with that. We've identified different project sites where we can do retrofits in different parts of town to maybe not start from scratch, but do a lower cost project that still gets us some of the credits that we need. But it's going to be a huge and expensive commitment that the city has to make. I mean, based on our preliminary estimates, to treat 400 acres, you're probably looking at $25 to $30 million. And as part of the permit, they want you to provide a plan that shows how you're going to do this by 2025. And we currently don't have in our stormwater CIPs, various ones in the city budget, we don't have anywhere near that amount of funding set aside at this point. So we are working with Michelle and finance to work with the resources that we have. We're aggressively trying to get grant funding to do some of these projects. But we feel that that's still going to leave us short on the amount of funding that we need. And so that was part of the reason that the Stormwater Advisory Committee was formed. So you get a handle on the total scope of our stormwater program and to look at what are the costs to actually operate this system and come up with some ideas for trying to fund all those expenditures. And so we've been meeting monthly since March, yeah, and we're going to continue to meet once a month. The plan now is to meet monthly until December. And then in December, we'll have a draft report or recommendations from the advisory committee, and our plan is to bring that to the council in January and go through everything that the committee has reviewed, look at their recommendations for different schemes that we may be able to use to try to raise the money to meet the requirements of the permit, and to talk about steps going forward. So really, this was just an update tonight of what the permit requirements are. We do need authorization to go ahead and send in this notice of intent form that says to MDE, yes, we would like to be covered under this permit. That form has to be submitted to them by October 31st. So we'd want, if the council's in agreement, we'd like to get authorization to go ahead and do that.
The thing I'd add is, in addition to doing stormwater projects in the future, we would also look at other things we could do to get credits to kind of achieve the same goals. So maybe it's street sweeping, we're getting 2 new street sweepers, maybe it's inlet cleaning, maybe it's tree planting, maybe it's tree planting outside the city limits, and we can get some sort of a trade for that, because that might be cheaper than building stormwater ponds in the city. Those kind of things that there are credits available for, we'll certainly be looking at all those kind of things too. So try to tackle this in many different ways.
Is taking customer base that's currently on septic, that's one of the options?
Yeah. Yeah, which there isn't any in the city. So they're all outside the city limits.
Right.
So I've had some preliminary conversations at the county about that issue, and it doesn't sound like there's any plans to build sewer systems. They're talking more about having a mechanism to offer people to pump their septic systems for them.
We could always create 400 acres of pervious area by tearing the streets and just having it.
That's true.
Right.
Well, that's the most effective means of dealing with it, is to
Yeah,
to
I
get
mean,
rid of the
eliminate
impervious
blacktop.
area.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And there will be some of that.
yeah.
It's going to take a lot of
You
different
know,
things.
years ago, I joked around and said, why don't we just buy 400 acres outside the city, annex it, and plant trees and leave it at that? But
You only get a third credit for trees, right?
Yeah.
So you have to buy 1,200 acres.
okay. All right.
So how about the blighted buildings that we keep talking about tearing down? If we turn those into parkland?
Yeah,
That's-
they stay
no,
in
it's a-
some sort of
Can't be a
Green.
parking lot, it has
Yeah,
to be
right,
a
right.
green space.
So we just could keep depleting the possibility of tax revenue by tearing down buildings and planting grass.
So it might
It's gonna hit our citizens any way you look at it.
buy us a little
Increase
time
maintenance.
to figure out how to process that much stormwater.
What about planting grass on top of buildings?
I think
It's
for
been
a
done.
city of this size and complexity, conversion of stormwater management is gonna have to be one of your most cost-effective options. I mean, other small jurisdictions have that ability to do plantings and things, because every one of these is a fraction of a credit. It's not a true credit. Your biggest bang for the buck is converting septic to sewer. And, I mean, that's, dollar for dollar, you get more credit towards MS4 with that effort than you do anything else. But in our case, we don't have that capability, so I would assume converting, retrofitting stormwater management facilities has got to be at the top of that list in terms of the credits we can accomplish.
Yeah, there's over 100
They're just not cheap.
facilities in the city. Most of them we don't own. We never wanted to own these
Right.
stormwater management facilities, so to retrofit them, we have to go talk to the owners and work those things out. I think they'll probably let us, but they'll probably tell us to take it over.
I was gonna say, they're always willing to give them up,
Yeah. Yeah. But
if it means fully giving them
those
up.
are all things we'll have to put together in our plan.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Any other questions for Jim or Ron? Thank you,
It's
guys.
the first of many discussions.
Yeah?
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Approve an ordinance I'm down here, request for qualifications, indoor sports center, Rodney.
So I've worked with Victus, and we put together this request for qualifications, and before we put it out on the street, which we could do as early as tomorrow, we wanted to get your feedback just to make sure that we're on the right page with everybody. Basically, the RFQ asks for private developers to partner with us to design, construct, operate, and maintain an indoor sports center. We give them 3 possible sites, a portion of the corner of the Fairgrounds Park, this municipal stadium site, and the greens at Hamilton Run. Basically, what they are going to be submitting to us is their qualifications on projects that they've done like this in other parts of the United States. They have to give us some details on what they're proposing, kind of a loose kind of bubble master plan, project schedule, their operating approach, you know, what they're asking of us, if anything. We're basically telling them in here that we're not giving them anything other than the land. And then their partnership and funding model and how they're going to finance it and operate it and those kind of things. So all those things need to be included in their proposal. The schedule would be that we'd get it out on the street as soon as possible. We get the proposals back this fall. We would review them in December and come back to you in January with a recommendation on a proposal that makes the most sense, and then we would go from there. You know, the proposals will be all over the place, I think, as far as what they are offering. Some will say they need this and this and this from the city. Others will be more, you know, if you give us this property, we'll be able to develop this in certain ways that they won't require as much of us. But I think those are the kind of things we're going to have to weigh out when we look at these proposals. Ryan from Victus seems to think we'll have really good interest in this. He thinks we'll get many proposals. It's just a question of will any of them be to our liking when we get them. So I just wanted to get any input or feedback you have before I release this to the developer world.
So that if there's like a construction journal or something like that where this RFP
Brian
goes
has
to?
6 or 7 firms that do this kind of work across the country that he would send them to. So that'll be a start. We would advertise it in all the different ways that we advertise. And I think the word will get out that way too. But he knows who does this kind of work in the
Why
United
did
States.
Victor say that the existing soccer fields not be considered?
Well, those soccer fields at Fairgrounds Park could be included. Is just from our discussion before, we understood that they were going to remain. But if we want to include the fields at Fairgrounds Park as part of this, we could.
You're
That's
talking
kind of-
about the fields in the main park.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't think there was any interest in removing that.
Right. But if there is, we certainly can include that.
Yeah,
What we
I don't-
include basically was the grandstand and that corner up there that was always kind of envisioned as a community center area when the park was developed back in the 90s.
But, but not the area where the ice rink has proposed?
We didn't include that, and that's one thing I wanted to bring up is,
I guess that was my understanding of what was going to be included in the Fairgrounds Park.
we certainly can do that.
I didn't think it was gonna be the fronted site or the space.
The
I guess.
grandstand site
Yeah,
is what they
I knew
were
what you're talking
recommending.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think that was the site we were envisioning.
Only
Okay.
because of the grandstand being the expense of
Well, I
removing the
don't-
grandstand, right?
Well, I don't think it has the same potential synergy that the ice rink proposal offered. I mean, it doesn't have the same accessibility to parking, the same accessibility to ingress and egress, you know, or the ability to directly relate to what that, you know, entity, you know, basically put on the table. And as I said then, you know, any entity could put that on the table,
Mhm.
you know, and run with that idea in a private nature.
And that was the question I wanted to ask is, do you want, the ice rink we know has a proposal, should they respond to this RFP? Or should, when they come in next month as part of their annual update, present their
I think
proposal?
anybody should respond, but I think the bigger question here is, again, I didn't think I thought that was the location we were thinking of at the table when we said Fairgrounds Park, not the other location.
Okay.
That-
This
that-
is the location that he recommended in the
Fairgrounds
study.
Park.
Yeah, at the grandstand.
At the grandstand. That's what I was thinking. I didn't imagine it being near the ice rink, but more near the grandstand. That was just what I thought that we were.
That was the last discussion, because that
Yeah.
was his recommendation, but, I mean, as
But-
Rodney says, we can add another.
We can add it,
Add
yeah.
it as another site, have 4 sites.
There's no harm in adding another site.
No, I'm just saying there's no accessibility to parking. It's not a flat site, and it requires significant demolition.
Yeah, you'd have to tear the grandstand.
I mean, I guess
Whereas the
I look-
flat site, of course, that requires no demolition, is already there with the sign.
And right next to all the parking. I guess that's why I kind of looked at that, and, again, that's,
Yeah. But those steel structures, though, from my experience, the demolition of those is less than you would think because of the value of the scrap.
yeah.
Was there any reason why they
State does.
didn't anticipate incorporating the existing soccer fields and softball fields into a complex? Or was that then off limits?
I think what they were thinking is that we would have a year-round sports facility. You'd have those outdoor fields in the summer, obviously, and then an indoor facility. And then that kind of complements all your infrastructure you have there, your parking, all your utilities, everything like that. So I guess they saw it as one big complex. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm just wondering, the person who puts together the proposal, basically they're going to be proposing building and running it, is my understanding.
Right, that's what we're asking.
So the incentive would be, it seems like the incentive would be better if, from my standpoint, if I were someone interested in developing this, if I had access to those soccer fields and softball fields as part of this facility I'm going to operate, that gives me a whole lot more to sell than just a narrow strip where the grandstands are.
Okay, so to operate and manage those fields.
Right.
But doesn't that then, well, number one, I'm not interested in the grandstand site. I'm definitely not interested in getting rid of or converting management of the baseball or soccer, or the softball or soccer fields. I mean, I don't think that any of the participants in this process to date have been given an indication that type of disruption was in consideration.
That's true.
But at the same time, I think it's important, if we're talking about the demolition of the grandstand's location, and I assume the keeper's house or whatever I mean, you're talking, number one, about cost, but also regulatory process with the state. And secondly, you're talking about buyback because you've used state funding to accomplish those things.
Yeah, I'll be in to talk to you actually next week about the grant, about the entrance building. But we did apply for a grant to do some restoration work there. We didn't get the grant, so we have an issue now we have to figure out how to deal with. Yes, we would have to pay back about $100,000 if we decide to tear it down,
Tear,
The keeper's house.
the keeper's house down and the entrance building.
what I'm saying is if you also divest yourselves of the grandstand building, I mean, we've used state money, didn't we use it to buy the property at the outset?
Yeah, we use program open space money,
Right.
but it would still be a public recreational use, just not owned by the city.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a good point. We'd have to make sure those details are worked out.
Yeah, we
I
don't
think
have
we'd-
those encumbrances on those other two locations
It's true, yeah,
of the historical context or the monetary context.
it's true. Each site has its unique issues that would have to be worked out, and I think you're highlighting a couple of them for the fairgrounds.
So does that mean that we take the fairgrounds out now?
I'm just one person saying that
know.
I'm not interested in this particular location. I'm only interested in the fairgrounds if it pertains to the location adjoining the ice rink. That's just me.
I don't care either way, either location at the fairgrounds. I would be fine with either, or the one that's there.
My understanding was the whole interest in pursuing this is to have a venue to attract outside sports teams to the area to participate in soccer, softball, indoor soccer, indoor activities, outdoor activities, to pull business into the city and develop the hotel business, develop restaurant business. And this is to be a focal point for drawing crowds of people and youth sports teams and the parents and all the kids that come with them into the city to develop the city. So it seems, it just doesn't seem to me that we would want to not take advantage of what we already have built here. And I know, you know, there are people who are already using these facilities that kind of, in some cases, think of them as their own, but they are the city's. And I think I just don't see the rationale for not taking advantage of what we've already built and incorporating that into this venue that we want to attract people to.
I mean, you have a softball organization made up of a number of different entities that have invested a significant amount of money in these fields that bring in more than a dozen tournaments right now, probably one of our largest hotel motel tax creators. And I'm not, I would agree with you if there weren't that happening. But that's happening right now under the efforts of an entity that we have a longstanding and positive relationship that has shown the ability to maximize use of these existing facilities as they are, and not just maximize the use, but actually invest. I mean, they're the ones that you know, put up the money for the lights and things like that, and are paying, you know, a good freight of the bills. It isn't like it's some entity out there that's just using them for recreational purposes at the city's dime, and you know, and thereby claiming it theirs. They've put, you know, more than a decade's worth of time and money and resources into building a very successful softball business out there.
Yeah, specifically the softball area.
Mhm.
The soccer, not so much,
Mhm.
but softball, that's definitely true.
But we'll be able to tell, I mean, like, once these, you know, proposals come in, I mean, obviously, the people that are investing will select the best site for them.
Absolutely.
So then, you know, based on what their needs are and what,
If you take off.
Right, I
But if
mean-
you take locations out of play for them, then they don't know those locations are available.
no, I understand that, but we're trying to, like, hone in on which ones that we think that they should select, based, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah, Basically,
I mean, I don't think
if
that-
you don't want a proposal for this area, then we shouldn't include it in there.
right,
So
exactly.
that's,
Yeah, so I think that, you know, we either add another one or we keep it as is, because, you know, us sitting here trying to decide which location that we think is best is not the point.
exactly.
We're just letting
Are
them
you
select it.
open to these three
Right, we're
sites
open,
being proposed
exactly.
on?
And we could talk for another 2 hours about how much, you know, we think it should go in one location or another, but that's,
I still think you add the soccer fields. I mean, that's the most logical site. You can create soccer fields almost anywhere, open soccer fields almost anywhere. But you already have the parking there, you already have the flat land ready. I mean, I think if you take that, if you don't add that, I think you're missing out on a possibility of somebody would select a site like that.
if it's okay to add 4, then, or add another one,
I think you
then,
just add on to the
Yeah.
fairgrounds. So, on the fairgrounds, we would, just make sure I understand, we would keep what we have here, but also add in the possible operation of the soccer fields in the area in front of the ice rink?
I think we're gonna do that, you just add in the fairgrounds.
Okay,
Minus the 3 softball fields.
okay.
I think
That's
you
basically
add-
what we're doing.
I think you add in the fair, I know,
Yeah.
but the mayor's saying add in just the soccer fields, which gets me back to the, to.
Now, it's only because I'm saying they take it out in the beginning. You know, however, existing baseball fields, softball fields, soccer fields, and ice arenas should remain.
Right.
So
I
they
hear
take
what
it
you're
out right
saying.
away, I mean, and you're losing that possibility that could be
I guess what I'm saying is you got a yellow line drawn on a map here.
Yeah.
You might as well just draw the yellow line on the 3 soccer fields and the spot beside the ice rink.
Right.
And say,
That's what I'm
these are the
asking.
areas outside, these are the areas out at the fairgrounds that are available for consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That would be
I
good.
just think that's simpler
Yep.
than,
It's my only concern with the ice rink site is that there's been a plan for a second sheet of ice since that ice rink opened. And I know we heard, like, is there a substantial plan with a funding source? Like, how far in the process is that?
I don't know. There certainly is an idea there. Like I said, the board that runs the ice rink comes into this body every October and
Yeah.
does a report. So you'll see them next month. I can encourage them to bring in their proposal at that time. We can talk about it, or I can have them respond to this RFP.
I think it's a little dangerous to let them be outside the RFP. If they're interested in the RFP, they should
They
go
should
through the
submit like
RFP
anybody
process.
else.
Just like anybody else,
there's
I would
a lot of
agree with
said
I
on
think it
that.
just-
Be
it
careful
opens up
putting
a
an
li-
idea
yeah.
out there, somebody could steal it.
right? I think, and they would have an opportunity to answer the RFP just like anybody else would. I think that just keeps council safer than entertaining that proposal outside the RFP, since you're actually issuing the RFP right now.
But we're okay with the Greens at Hamilton Run Municipal Stadium, right? Those two levels.
I'm
okay.
opposed to Hamilton Run. I've been opposed since the beginning on that.
Okay.
So
How
you're,
about everybody
Ron, you're
else?
gonna change the,
Everybody else?
I'm fine with it, considering it.
you're gonna
Shell.
change the map.
I'm fine with it.
Emma,
Yeah.
fine with it, okay.
Very good.
Good enough.
All right.
One last question. Under overview, paragraph 2, I mean, these are things that Victus came up with
Yeah.
based on discussions. I would hope that we're not, by putting that in there, I would hope that we're not deliberating upon anybody that may have an interest, that these are the, or that this is the scope that we are looking for. In other words, if somebody comes in, you know, and we ran into this, we were with the EDC, frankly, at the county level, when, you know, I had an entity that says, hey, you know, I think the indoor turf thing's good, and somebody says, well, let's have an aquatic center with it, and so I want to make sure that any entity that has an interest isn't marrying themselves to some proposal that includes any one of these pieces. In other words, if somebody comes in and says, you know, and I'm just gonna be very frank here, because I think that the turf court, the turf facility is what the big necessity of this community is for the folks that are leaving this community now to go seek, that we don't have, and we have tons of hard courts all over this county. In every school, and half the churches we have, you know, for accessibility. All I'm saying is if somebody comes in and says, hey, I wanna do this, but it's gonna be, you know, a basketball court, 2 turf facilities, and a volleyball court, like the Frederick or the Gettysburg, plan.
Right.
That's their proposal, that we don't, I don't want us to sit back and say, well, no, you need to add these things because these are community needs.
I think, well, the way I think we've written it is that you'll see at least 4 courts and at least 1 or 2 turf fields. If that's not what you want, we probably ought to change
No,
that.
what I'm saying is, I'm hoping that by this, we're not saying somebody has to propose this.
We are saying that.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that's wrong. I think that's completely wrong.
I guess
Is
I'm
there a
not
way to
following you. What
word
should
it?
we be suggesting then?
I mean, what that analysis, you know, gathered, was that these are things that are needed in the community.
Right.
And what I'm saying is, if somebody's willing to come in and take one of these locations and construct this type of amenity, and let's take the ice rink proposal, perfect example. And they say, hey, we're gonna put 3 indoor turf fields, 2 volleyball courts, and a second sheet of ice in. That should be a valid proposal. They shouldn't be married to, this idea that they need to provide at least these other items. I
I see what
have
you're
a
saying.
hard time believing that the addition of 6 indoor basketball courts ranks anywhere near the level of need of indoor turf facilities. There's just no way in my mind
Okay.
given the construct of this community and.
But they did I mean,
activities
we
that-
paid for this analysis. I mean, aren't they the experts to know that this is what the community,
I
the
hear what you're
community
saying.
said?
I mean, I hear that.
So we should disregard that?
I'm saying that if an entity comes in and proposes some form,
So can't we change the
Of
language
these
to
amenities.
preferred? This is what we prefer, but if you have,
So, yeah, you want us to be flexible in this, is what I'm hearing
Yeah.
you say.
so it,
yeah.
So this, we could say this is preferred, but any combination
Will be considered.
Yeah.
of these types of
That seems reasonable.
facilities.
What I'm saying is, these are
will be
amenity
considered.
needs that the report identified. A developer that wants to develop and has the means to do so on any of these properties, of any construct of these number of items.
Yeah.
Should be given due
Yeah.
consideration, not, hey, no.
This is the
You
requirement.
gotta add these other, you gotta add two more
Right.
courts, you gotta add.
Okay, well,
I
that,
just-
yeah, this has to be changed then, because we
Yeah,
are.
just the verbiage, yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
We'll change the verbiage and send it around so that you can get an okay from everybody. We can move forward, please.
Okay, we should be able to do that this week.
Thank you. Anything else for Rod?
Very good.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
PEP eligible business categories for rent relief?
Right, good evening,
Hello.
everyone. Hello. Okay, so the purpose for our discussion this evening is to discuss the current Partners in Economic Progress program for the rent relief, businesses that are eligible or not eligible for the rent relief. So in your memo, you have the list of categories for businesses that are currently eligible. And then I've also attached the land management code, and the red circles are currently not eligible, and then the yellow highlights are eligible. The review committee has met and discussed, whether or not to make any changes to the current guidelines, and the review committee has recommended no changes be made. However, I wanted to discuss with you, if you wanted to go through either by category or page by page and look at the eligible businesses or all of the businesses. But keep in mind, if you do open it up to just make it everyone is eligible, you're also including like substance abuse centers, what else? Transitional facilities.
But we just actually enhanced in Hagerstown, which could be a supplement of this as opposed to falling under the PEP program itself. Someone who wants to create, I don't know, just use barbers for instance, on the second floor, and they want to add 2 chairs, and it's going to cost $15,000 to do that, to retrofit that area. They'd be eligible for a third of that as a grant program through Invest Hagerstown, right?
Correct. They could apply, especially for the smaller grant
Right.
intended for that. And to give a little more background, the intended uses for this incentive under PEP were originally for upper floors, and we did make a change for any first floor that was configured as non-retail. So, for example, if you look at the Bulls and Bears building, the retail space where Bulls and Bears is retail configured. To the side of that where the Arts Council is not retail configured. So that's an example of a eligible space on the first floor. It's non-retail configured.
And then something else, as the land management code changes and new categories of businesses are being allowed in the CCMU. Just to point out that wine pub and distillery pubs are also going to be allowed in the CCMU. So, you know, if all businesses are being considered, you know, we want to look at those as well.
I think that's the type of business we should be encouraging downtown, because that brings foot traffic and people. I think as opposed to the type of business, the strongest consideration should be how many people are they gonna employ and how many people are they gonna bring there? Is it gonna bring a lot of foot traffic? I think, in my mind, that's more important to me than what type of business it is. So if it's a barber shop that's gonna employ 15 people and have, you know, 100 people a day coming downtown or wherever, I think that would be more important than the fact that it's a barber shop. I'm just using that as an example because he did, but.
I thought the same thing when I was going through the list. You know, it seems like when I got to the restaurant part, but one was yellow and I think one wasn't circled when I looked at it. Like, it's in the back. Like one, depending on the size, I suppose?
And again, based on it going into space that is either upper floor or non-retail configured, you would be saying, as the example, a restaurant going into an upper floor, or a restaurant going into a space that is not configured for retail, which is pretty atypical. They're gonna go for the retail spaces. So we looked, when the original list of types of businesses was developed, it was those businesses that typically are on upper floors or are in non-retail locations because of the original intention of the program. And to give an additional layer of background, the rent relief comes into place after a developer has renovated the building to the minimum investment levels based on commercial, residential, or mixed-use minimums. So this isn't for any building downtown, but the developer first does the renovations, and then the rent relief comes into place just for those buildings that have gone through the renovation, with the intent being a way for that developer to attract its first set of tenants through a redeveloped building.
And it's only the first set of tenants once the space gets the final use and occupancy. So once that space has been occupied, then say by a PEP, as a PEP tenant, then it's no longer eligible. So it's a one and done kind of
One
deal.
tenant.
One tenant per space.
I see. So the restaurants I was looking at was 4-137. And I'm just confused, because the restaurants, no limit on size, restaurants not, which is circled red, and then there's nothing on the second. Restaurants not to exceed 3,000, it's actually in the CL district, so is that?
Right, so we were only looking at the types of businesses permitted
Okay.
in CCMU.
Okay.
So we're just reading straight down the CCMU column.
Gotcha.
So, just to understand the tax basis implications there, for instance, on page 4-133, we have public administration use, a governmental entity or something like that. That would be a public administration function that is paying rent for that space, therefore that building would still be subject to property taxes. It would not, if the entity that's renting the space in the building is a 501(c) organization or tax exempt in any other way, we will still be gathering property tax revenue off of that building.
Yes, because
Because-
you can't say yes to everything.
Right.
It would depend upon what the nonprofit is, and if that is outside of their normal course of business, you know, whatever that might be, and they're getting rents from that, then yes, we would pay they would pay taxes on it.
The landlord.
Yeah,
would pay
yes.
taxes.
What have you heard from the developers with this level of category, or with these categories, have you noticed that, like, they're begging for lots of barber shops? Or are there other, like, things that you've heard, like they're having trouble getting their first tenant to, take advantage of this?
I
you
think
noticed?
we did go through a review of the categories, I think, in 2011 or 2012. So we broadened the categories at that point, and I think they're serving the developers well. We did have one applicant, and it's referenced in the memo, that was not approved because of being ineligible, who is in the category of a hair salon. And so,
Is that the only applicant that we have turned down throughout the course of this process?
have to think back on that,
I thought we turned down a one of them in the Grand at one time that had like a real estate or an insurance office.
which was not necessarily based on the category of business, but rather we look at foot traffic generation as an additional measure. We start first with category and then also look at foot traffic measure.
So if they're in yellow, they're in. If they're in red, they're out.
Correct.
That confuses me because you just said you look at something else. I just want to understand very clearly, if they're in yellow, are they eligible?
They're not
Yes.
automatically approved, though.
Right, they're not
Then there's a
automatically.
subjective process.
Right.
That they go through.
They complete an application and
Right.
talk about other criteria that is a part of the program, including foot traffic. If they have relocated from within the district, they need to demonstrate expansion. So if someone's moving within the CCMU, they need to demonstrate to our review committee that their business is expanding. That's
Otherwise, they keep hopping.
right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So if you were able to add something like Emily suggested, like restaurants, out in your economic development discussions, do you think that that would be something that would be more incentivizing for something that the community has talked about and we could really probably use?
I wouldn't recommend it for this specific program, for the Partners in Economic Progress program. We do have a retail and restaurant incentive that operates independently of the PEP program. So there is a tool to use for restaurant and retail attraction. And we did get state community legacy money to continue offering incentives in that area. Again, looking back at the design and the original intent of this program, one of our I think most successful and longstanding programs for its original intention, which is get a developer to commit for 100% commercial building. It's a $250 investment in bringing the core systems of the building up, and then we'll come behind and to help them attract their first set of tenants, offer this rent relief. And we're really looking at filling the upper floors, because those are the hardest portions of a building to fill.
So if you have a subjective process after this black and white determination, why have the black and white determination? In other words, I'm looking at one here, and, we talk about, like, one of the things was retail, I've heard foot traffic, but obviously, once we talk about foot traffic, well, there are abuse assistance entities that exist downtown right now that generate a lot of foot traffic. You can make that argument, hey, I'm generating tons of people. May not be the people we want generated, but they're generating people. And so there's one subjective item that sort of, throws a wrench into that measure from the outset. But then I look at a category that doesn't appear to be, and I get its special exception, research and development facilities. And I think of a place or a business like, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot his name already. Board of Ed. The gentleman that was Board of Ed, the doctor, started the business.
What are you talking about, right?
Right there is an entity that would be like a prime candidate for that type of sort of startup interest. What did he start? Bionera or whatever the weird name was for it.
Show me where, and what page are you on? for
I'm on
research?
4145, research and development facilities, under special exception. So it's not a permitted use, it's a special exception. But that eliminates a small startup company like his that we're simply saying no to right from the outset because there appears to be sort of a presumed belief that it's not going to be of the type that can produce that potential growth capability.
If I had to guess on why that's not originally is because it's
So
by
then-
special exception, but I
I
understand.
get you. So then they go out to Robinwood to the incubator system out there, and then Robinwood gets all of the benefit of having an entity like that start up out there instead of right here. That just seems odd to me.
Right. I would support that idea of research and development if they were successful in achieving the special exception. I think that is a fair suggestion.
I feel like we're being somewhat subjective on which ones we believe are going to succeed, or are going to achieve success in general. I get it, on some of these, they're obvious, but things that are fairly broad in category of commerce capability, of economic development capability, I have to wonder why we're almost sort of hedging by going through this list and picking and choosing, which ones may or may not achieve that result right from the outset. I'd rather you just use the subjective process, eliminate the ones that are nonprofits and residential in nature right from the outset, you know what I mean? And then open the door up to all those other commercial ideas and provide that opportunity to at least get the subjective review.
Yeah, I don't think we should be turning down any particular type of business. If have a solid business plan, they're gonna bring foot traffic, they're gonna employ people. I don't think we should, it's not like we're overcrowded with businesses right now. I think we should trying to be getting as many of them as possible. So to make it easier as possible to get them established.
I agree.
So you just
So
want to
we'll take
throw
it
out the
back.
guidelines for Beth.
Well, I don't think we're throwing out the
No.
guidelines at all. What I'm saying is, I feel like we've predisposed ourselves to choosing that research and development facility, isn't, isn't going to be a successful possibility. That, hell, even veterinary services, completely enclosed. I don't know what that means in context, especially given today's standard of the level of individuals that use all types of service animals for, personal purposes. But again, I could go through and look at all the nonprofits and the residential-oriented ones and say, yeah, I can understand, why you don't want an automated teller system, or the obvious ones like public parks or bed and breakfast, any
Warehousing
of
and
those.
storage.
But when you look at brew pubs and all those types of things, I have to imagine that areas much more urban than our own certainly don't start off at the beginning of this type of incentive process in places like Baltimore and Frederick and other areas and say, you know what, we're going to exclude all of these right from the outset. I feel like you have a competent and capable committee then that can make that subjective selection process to say, of every type of commercial interest that comes forward, that they can competently make that determination to say, yes, it should or shouldn't.
The program is designed to create opportunity, so we can't, by
We got-
pigeonholing it like this, I think that
We got
we're-
theater and performing arts, apparently, I guess, on page 4137, that's excluded. And that's excluded right from the outset, even though we've said categorically that arts and entertainment, is,
our district.
basically our theme. But I don't know who could fall in those parameters, I don't know who's gonna come in and make some offer for some type of business proposal. I'm thinking of, Ms. Perini, that had, I forget what the performing arts, entity she has, but if she came down and had a solid business plan, and it was gonna bring in students that accompanied, other efforts going on right now, I would hope that we wouldn't say, you know what, we like what you got, but, we can't give you this incentive to do it.
Or the Maryland Entertainment Group that we had talked about. Same idea.
So a potential next step would be for us to take this discussion back to the review committee and come back with a wider recommendation.
I think there are clearly ones in here you could go through and X off right away. And I have complete faith that your committee, that of all those other ones left, as they come in, and I don't feel like there's gonna be some sort of like swarm, of them in these other categories, but that they could have the competent capability to say, okay, thank you for your application. We don't approve it based on this subjective matter that we've, that we've measured it by. And then if they feel aggrieved by that decision, then they can come here.
Sounds good. So we'll take it back and then come back to you with a further fleshed out recommendation.
Come back next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions you have?
Nope, good. Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks. An application for 2018 Justice Assistance Grant. I think this is a yes.
This is a technical step that has to be done for the grant.
Good afternoon. Yes, in order to receive the Bureau of Justice grant, one of the things we have to do is to notify this body to get approval from you to actually accept the grant. So we've already taken one of the steps by posting it on our website, and which is one of the requirements, and now this does the other part of that. So it's a $20,000 grant. We receive it every year. We apply for it every year. It goes towards overtime for special assignments that we do to address those things that are outside budgetary preparations that we normally look at. So things that come up throughout the year that allow us to go out and address situations as they arise.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So,
It's easy.
You'll also
We
have
have been
a,
notified.
you'll have an actual motion that will come before you
Yeah.
at a meeting, so.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Mike Spiker, Potomac Edison Property Tree Easement Request.
Good evening. Staff was approached by Potomac Edison First Energy in regard to increasing right-of-way specifically on two properties in our watershed area. They're going to be a party to a transmission upgrade. It's going to occur from Pennsylvania down to their station in Maryland and across to another station. So we work with legal counsel, worked through their document and back and forth a few times for approval. So our legal counsel is fine with the language. We're fine with the language. It grants them a little more latitude and some dead trees they take down. They still notify us. So there's nothing earth-shattering in the document. It's just an increase for two specific properties.
One of the things that I've noted, because this is an agreement, Potomac Edison to basically cut down trees in your area, right?
That's correct.
And I noticed that, everybody thinks, that's the case, but typically they hire third-party providers to do that.
Correct.
They don't do it themselves.
Correct.
And there are times when those third-party providers, there isn't somebody from Potomac Edison sort of sitting out there on the job, going, hey, make sure you clean it up this way and that way. I would just hope, and you have it here in paragraph 3, where it basically says the grantee will repair or replace to the satisfaction of the grantor all fences, gates, lanes, driveways, drains, and ditches damaged or destroyed by it on said premises or if mutually agreed upon. And it limits it to those things. All I'm saying is it doesn't appear to give you the ability to say, hey, you left a pile of trees on our property that looks like a beaver dam, and that needs to be cleaned up in some way.
The working relationship with Potomac Edison is very good. They make notification of us before they go on our property, and specifically on the transmission group. When they come up, we have a lock on that gate. There's been some damage to it, so we've been satisfied in the past. There may be some change in the future for how they operate, but so far, in my tenure here and in my previous life. It's been a very good relationship with him. If you'll notice, there's some good language in there that actually protects us for the rest of our property also, that we're happy to have inserted.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Yes, sir, thank you.
City Administrator.
Yes, I'd just like to announce that on this Thursday, September 13th at 10 o'clock at the library, you all, mayor and council, will be having a goal and priority setting meeting. That's this week. That's right, this week, and it's starting at 10, and it's all day.
All day.
And so, just
With lunch.
looking forward to that, and you should have your packets for that. I believe they were advertised today, too.
you didn't.
Thank you, that's all there.
You didn't.
Ms. Keller, anything from you tonight? Krista?
I have a question. I've seen a couple of pictures now of Burhan's, and then I had somebody call me and say, why has there been a cone sitting in the bottom of Burhan's for months now? And then you see the pictures of the flooding. I'm just curious, have we provided information to the public adequately enough of why
I'd
that's
have to check
occurring?
on that then, okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the pictures on Facebook, the last two times it's sort of filled out. But there's a traffic barrier, it's been there for.
So you want more public,
Well, I'm guessing that we're having similar issues that we had with the one over near Memorial Boulevard.
In front of Public Works.
When that need cleaned out, all I'm saying is we could just let the public know,
okay.
because it's been there for some time now.
I'll
Now
talk
we've
to,
had
I'll talk to Wes.
two significant backups.
Right.
Get it?
Yep.
Nothing?
Nothing tonight.
I don't have anything new. Fantastic. See you next week.
Can we take a group picture?
Yes.
In our purple?